Come with me as I unravel the mystery of the missing 14-year-old on a train. The oak tree had a special place in their hearts. The mighty oak was thought by some to have miraculous healing abilities or to be a conduit to the gods. Trees of oak may survive for generations. The fact that it takes them a long time to produce acorns makes them a sign of maturity and patience. Oak trees have long been a symbol of power, strength, stability, and protection due to their towering trunks, extensive branches, and deep roots. Andrew Gowen has always had a deep interest in the scientific method. He rocketed through school, earning consecutive A's and even taking first place in European mathematical contests. He was accepted into the National Association for Gifted and Talented Youth, a government program in the UK for the top 5% of pupils, due to his above-average intelligence. Andrew was compelled to give it a go after reading that a little acorn put in a container might eventually mature into a small oak tree. Kevin, Andrew's father, was there to provide a hand since he was always happy to satisfy his son's insatiable appetite for knowledge and inspire him to pursue his passions. Kevin collected some abandoned acorns, and he and his father put them in pots at their Victorian terrace house in the English neighborhood of BBY, which is located in the South Yorkshire area. They only needed to wait now. Kevin Gowen and his wife Glenys came home from work on Friday, September 14, 2007, to discover a mundane scenario. Andrew, 14, and Charlotte, 17, the couple's children, had just returned to school after summer break and were getting back into the swing of things. This meant that Andrew could spend his free time doing what made him happy, such as playing video games in the renovated basement of his home or snooker on the half-sized table in his bedroom. Andrew was an introverted, quiet youngster who enjoyed spending time alone, despite having a small circle of friends he spent time with at school. You could usually find him curled up with a good book at home, since he hated getting out and meeting new people. For some reason, Andrew's parents didn't notice when he didn't come up to greet them. Andrew, they thought, would be off enjoying one of his hobbies till supper was ready. The Gowen family would often gather around the dinner table to share stories and laughs. In order to get the dinner ready, Kevin and Glenys started by unloading the groceries. That evening, Alan Murray, a personal friend and pastor of the family, who lived nearby, would be joining them. Although Kevin and Glenys Gowen were Anglicans, they preferred that their children had the freedom to decide for themselves concerning religion. This is why they never christened their children, and why they didn't bat an eye when Andrew and Charlotte decided to quit going to church. Meal preparation was complete by 6 p.m. All the kids were invited to come and play with their parents. Andrew remained silent as Charlotte hurriedly came out of her room. After Kevin left, Andrew's room was inspected. After school, the adolescent would always hang up his blazer and tie on his bedroom chair before placing his pants and shirt in the washing machine. Everything about this night was the same. The remainder of Andrew's attire was in the washing machine, and his blazer and tie were resting on a chair, but he was nowhere to be seen in the home. Even though Andrew would normally leave a message, even if he was only ducking to the corner store, no such note was located. Despite the peculiarity of the situation, Andrew's parents did not express excessive worry. Andrew was thought to have wandered out to see a buddy who lived in the area and been disoriented as a result. Because Andrew did not own a mobile phone, they were unable to contact him by phone or text. He had 2 phones in the past, but he never really utilized them and eventually lost them. There were moments when he was completely disinterested in the gadgets and might be pretty forgetful. Even for his most recent birthday, he had requested an Xbox game system rather than his parents' present of a new one. After visiting Andrew's friends' houses, the Gowens learned he wasn't there. Andrew reportedly skipped school that day as well, according to their sources. It had begun like any other Friday morning. Andrew got up a little later than normal, but he was still able to get ready for the school bus. It took Andrew around 4 kilometers, or 15 minutes on the bus, to get to Macaulay Catholic K from the Gowens' house. He left the home in his school uniform after saying farewell to his parents at around 8:05 a.m. Not long after this, Vicar Alan Murray remembered seeing the Gowens' house as he drove past Westfield Park. Because the park was a detour to the school bus stop, he hadn't given Andrew's outfit much consideration as he went past. The Gowens were perplexed since Andrew's uniform was at home, but he was nowhere to be seen. The administration at Molly High was notified, and Andrew's absence that day was verified. I never would have predicted this. Andrew was always present in class. Certificates for his perfect performance had even been handed to him by the school. An employee had attempted to contact the Gowans earlier in the day to inform them of Andrew's odd absence, but no one had answered the phone. After some thought, the employee concluded that they must have mistakenly called the number 2 spots above or below Andrew's on the register, therefore excluding his family from the conversation. The Gowans speculated that Andrew may have been in an accident on the way to school, even though it didn't specify why his uniform was at home. Before taking Andrew's usual route to school, they drove around their neighborhood looking for suspects. He was nowhere to be found. No one matching the teenager's description had been admitted to the nearby hospitals, despite their calls. His family called the police when they still hadn't heard from Andrew by 9 p.m. Andrew hadn't escaped, according to the Gowans. They spoke highly of him, saying he was an honest, kind young guy who would never deliberately make them anxious. The Gowans said that they had a peaceful and joyful home life. With the modest but pleasant lifestyle that Kevin and Glennis were able to achieve as speech therapists, they were able to take family vacations to exotic locations like Egypt and Tunisia. The Gowans were unaware that Andrew had any difficulties with his mental health, had never been the target of bullying, and had no other challenges that he may want to flee. His actions up to this point had been completely typical. On the contrary, he had been noticeably more reserved and withdrawn than normal, although this hardly warranted alarm. When Andrew didn't think he had anything important to contribute, he kept quiet. Kevin had lately inquired as to his son's progress at the start of the new academic year. Andrew didn't seem to notice anything was wrong. They knew he would confide in Charlotte, his sister, if he ever felt uneasy talking to his parents. The Gowan siblings were quite close. Both of them were very bright and were expected to get admission to some of the most famous institutions in England. Along with a mutual love of heavy metal, rock, and post-hardcore bands like Slipknot, Funeral for a Friend, Muse, Evanescence, and Dragon Force, the two also had similar musical tastes. Andrew had a typical night before he vanished. Prior to the family meal, Andrew and Kevin had worked on a puzzle together. Afterwards, the father and son scoured the dishes. After that, Andrew and his mom watched some comedic TV. Even though he seemed somewhat irritated upon awakening the next morning, he had been his usual self before retiring to bed. Although this was unusual, it shouldn't have been taken too seriously since he was still a teenage guy. According to Kevin Gowan, who spoke to the Daily Mail, if Andrew was unhappy or suffering a mental illness, he did an amazing job of hiding it. According to Andrew's bank records, he departed from his house that morning and proceeded to a local gas station where he pulled 200 pounds out of his 214 pounds funds. The Gowan family's next-door neighbor was watching the street via a closed-circuit television. Something really out of the ordinary was seen in its video from that day. Around 8:30 in the morning, Andrew got back home from work, just after Kevin and Glennis departed for the office. Just 1 minute after that, he reappeared on the street, this time in jeans and a black Slipknot band t-shirt instead of his school uniform. His sister had stitched band patches onto a black canvas bag which he carried. Aside from Andrew's keys, wallet, and portable game system, the room was completely unoccupied. Even though the nights in September were cold, he neglected to bring the console's charger or a jumper. This meant to Andrew's loved ones that he wasn't planning on being absent for an extended period of time. His abrupt withdrawal from school and subsequent emptying of his bank account left them bewildered. Andrew was still considered a vulnerable, high-risk missing person by the police regardless of whether he had fled. Despite Andrew's family's assurances that he was a happy adolescent, they turned inward. Police had learned from experience that the vast majority of juvenile runaways were attempting to flee an abusive household. In an effort to find evidence of abuse or neglect towards Andrew, they interviewed all members of the Gowan family. The Gowans insisted that Andrew's parents were neither authoritarian nor dominating, but rather that he had an honest and open connection with them. Kevin and Glennis valued their children's uniqueness and autonomy and had complete faith in them. The police took Andrew's absence very seriously, but they also found that 91% of the approximately 70,000 British youngsters who ran away each year returned within 2 days, and 80% returned within 24 hours. According to the numbers, Andrew Gowan's return home was probably only a matter of time. Whitby, a coastal resort 85 miles north of Doncaster, was a beloved holiday destination for the Gowan family. Andrew was well familiar with the region and loved Whitby. There was a strong possibility that this was going to be his jumping-off point for whatever reason. Friend of the Goenses, Andrew searched Whitby and the surrounding region all weekend. They asked around at the teen's favorite spots to see if anybody had seen him. Andrew stood at a lean 5 feet 3 inches with medium-length light brown hair that flowed over his brown eyes, and he was clearly identified by his heavy prescription glasses, deafness in his left ear, and double ridge on his top right ear. The weekend passed with no sightings of Andrew in either Doncaster or Whitby, nor did he make contact with his family. The Goens wondered whether Andrew could have gone to London. Although the capital city was 170 miles away, it could be reached by train in just under 2 hours. While the bustling city could be seen as an intimidating place for a shy teen from the suburbs, Andrew wasn't completely new to the area. His family had friends and relatives who lived in London, including Andrew's grandparents. Over the years, the Goens had traveled to London numerous times. Andrew knew the city well, and his family thought he would feel comfortable navigating his way around alone. Although it would be entirely out of character, they wondered whether Andrew could have made the spontaneous decision to spend the Friday in the city. He'd recently mentioned having an interest in seeing the Tutankhamun exhibition at the British Museum. Perhaps ditching school was an act of teenage rebellion, and he'd then found himself in some kind of trouble. The local train station was contacted for comment. During questioning, the sales counter clerk remembered serving Andrew on Friday morning. Andrew had purchased a one-way ticket to London's King's Cross station, leaving at 9:35 a.m. She remembered the interaction because Andrew appeared too young to be traveling alone, but more importantly, he had turned down her offer of a return trip, even though it would have cost about £50 more. Several passengers had seen Andrew on the train to London that morning. He hadn't done anything out of the ordinary. He had remained glued to his PlayStation Portable the entire journey. One passenger remembered seeing Andrew disembark at King's Cross Station, but nobody could confirm what he did after that. The British Transport Police were assigned the task of analyzing CCTV footage from King's Cross Station on September 14th. The train from Doncaster had arrived at 11:20 a.m., but it would be difficult to find Andrew Goen in the crowd. King's Cross is one of the busiest railway stations in the UK, with about 300,000 passengers passing through each day. Despite the fact that Andrew had traveled to King's Cross, which was a major revelation, it raised even more questions. During the summer holidays, Andrew had turned down his parents' offer to stay with his grandmother in London. So, why would he go there now without first asking for permission? The Goen family got their hands on a copy of the latest edition of Time Out, a free weekly guide detailing all the latest events happening in the city. They scoured each page, on the lookout for anything that might have motivated Andrew's travels. Kevin had recently taken his children to London to watch Muse play live. It was the first major rock concert that Andrew had been to, and he thoroughly enjoyed the experience. The Goens looked into what other bands were playing in London on Friday, September 14th, 2007. They considered whether Andrew could have taken off to the city for a weekend of music and sightseeing. Perhaps he was following the mentality of asking for forgiveness rather than permission. American rock band 30 Seconds to Mars were playing that night at Brixton Academy. As far as the Goens were aware, Andrew wasn't familiar with their music. A prog metal band called Sixth was playing at the O2 Academy Islington, which was about a 15-minute walk from King's Cross. Although the Goens didn't know if Andrew knew of Sixth, the band did have links to Slipknot. It was a significant show, too, being the last time singer Mikey Goodman would feature on the lineup. Furthermore, Finnish rock band Him were doing an in-store signing at an HMV record store on the 17th of September, and Andrew was a fan of their music. If music wasn't the motivation, Andrew's parents wondered whether he could have gone to London seeking work experience. His sister Charlotte had done so at Andrew's age, so it was possible he wanted to follow in her footsteps. The fact that he only bought a one-way ticket didn't seem too strange to the Goens. Perhaps he'd made a momentary error, wasn't entirely sure of his plans, or intended to spend the night with one of the family's friends or relatives. The problem with this theory was that none of these people had seen or heard from Andrew. Police made inquiries with each one and found nothing to indicate that they'd crossed paths with the 14-year-old at the time. Bus and travel was free for children under 16 in London, meaning Andrew would have had the means to get around town. But the £200 that he'd taken with him wouldn't get him very far in terms of food and shelter. This led to the possibility that Andrew was sleeping rough, making him vulnerable to the dangers that lurked in the busy city streets. Given that Andrew had left home without any intention of returning, It was puzzling that he hadn't brought a change of clothes or, at a bare minimum, a warm sweater. Being a creature of habit and enjoying the comforts of home, Andrew lacked street smarts and looked considerably younger than 14. His family didn't think he would voluntarily put himself in an uncomfortable and dangerous situation. This brought us to another possibility. Had Andrew Gowen met someone in London? Since he spent most of his free time at home, there was little chance for him to cross paths with anyone outside of school. Having been a regular attendee of both the Boy Scouts and the church since he was a little boy, Andrew suddenly stopped attending both in the months preceding his disappearance. His parents assumed he was simply following in Charlotte's footsteps by ceasing to attend church, and questions were asked of members of both groups, but nothing came up to suggest that Andrew had any other motive for quitting. Andrew had gone to summer school in 2006 as part of the Gifted and Talented Youth Program. It was a residential program that kept him away from home for 2 weeks, but he had loved it and came back in a good mood. People wondered if he had made any friends there, but there was no proof of that. Neither his teachers nor his classmates could explain why he had gone to London. The only computer in the Gowen household was a laptop that Charlotte had gotten for her birthday 8 weeks ago. Andrew had never been very interested in computers. In fact, his family thought he didn't even have an email address. Andrew also didn't seem to want to be a part of social media, which was still in its early stages. At the time, the two main networking sites were Facebook and MySpace, but Andrew didn't have an account with either of them. After searching Charlotte's laptop, nothing was found that would suggest Andrew had been chatting with anyone online. Neither his school computers nor those from the local Doncaster library had any clues as to why he had gone to London or what he planned to do once he arrived. The Gowen family's home phone line did not show any strange activity. Since Andrew did not have a mobile phone, the only other way he could have accessed the internet would have been through one of his gaming consoles. While his Xbox did not have internet capabilities, his PlayStation Portable did, allowing him to communicate with others through text, voice, or video chat features. For this to work, he would need an email address, which would need an online account. However, upon inquiry with Sony, the developer of PlayStation, it was found that Andrew Gowen did not own such an account. The Gowens' worst fear was that Andrew had been groomed by a pedophile or sex trafficker and lured to London under false pretenses. Due to Andrew's high intelligence, he was mature for his age and had always related particularly well to adults. Although Andrew had never expressed it, his family considered the possibility that he could have been struggling with his sexual orientation and had run away because he felt ashamed or too awkward to come out. If this was the case, it could also explain why he might be more susceptible to grooming by an older male. But with no phone or online activity supporting this theory, it remained to be seen how Andrew could have come into contact with the predator. In the week leading up to his disappearance, there had been a slight change in Andrew's routine. While he typically caught the bus to school, in the new academic year, he'd twice chosen to walk instead, a 4-mile trip that took around an hour and 20 minutes on foot. The teenager could have been approached by someone during this time. He could have secretly been given a mobile phone, which he used exclusively to speak with this person. The two could have made plans to meet in London for one reason or another, with the groomer promising Andrew a ride home, hence why he had only bought a one-way ticket. However, according to Andrew's family, who spoke to the Times, these lengthy walks could have been a warm-up for a future scheme to wander the streets. Kevin and Glenys Gowen returned back and forth from London multiple times, searching the streets for their son. They went to every site that Andrew had ever shown interest in, and distributed missing person posters at every museum, train station, restaurant, and homeless shelter they could think of. They gathered as much media attention as they could, doing all they could to keep Andrew's case in the public mind. On the day he vanished, multiple eyewitnesses claimed to have seen Andrew. One of these was at a Pizza Hut on Oxford Street, close to King's Cross Station. The Gowens took this witness's description of the boy's mannerisms as credible, but the police were unable to corroborate it. Another eyewitness claimed to have seen someone matching Andrew's description sleeping rough near the London South Bank district. A third eyewitness claimed to have seen Andrew at a South Bank park near the London Assembly building. The Gowens pursued every lead, personally visiting these locations to question locals and search for their son, but nothing came to light. In the absence of any new information, South Yorkshire police were dispatched to London to examine the hundreds of hours of CCTV footage captured at King's Cross Station. At 11:24 a.m., 4 minutes after the train from Doncaster had reached the station, the distinctive figure of Andrew Gosden, wearing a black Slipknot t-shirt, stood out among the crowd. The teenager, in an unremarkable move, left the station through the main entrance alone before vanishing from view. Andrew had been missing for 27 days when the police discovered this sighting. The discovery was mixed for the Gowan family, who were irritated by what they saw as a slow, chaotic, and disorganized police response. King's Cross is essentially an interchange station, with many other tube stations and bus stops there, including an international station with connections to other parts of Europe. The available CCTV footage only showed that Andrew got off the train in London, but it didn't show what he did after that. Since Andrew hadn't brought his passport, it was unlikely that he continued his journey abroad, but it was possible that he hopped on a different train. London is one of the most monitored cities in the world. Some estimates put the average Londoner under surveillance 300 times a day. However, much to the disappointment of the Gowan family, the police had not sought to review footage from any other cameras. When requests were made to view footage owned by local authorities, no such footage existed. As was standard procedure, recordings were only retained for a specific number of days before being deleted. On Wednesday, October 17th, more than a month had elapsed since Andrew's last known whereabouts when, according to the BBC television program Missing Live, a woman named Philippa was out and about in London's Covent Garden district when she spotted a boy who looked suspiciously like the missing teenager. Philippa approached the boy and attempted to strike up a conversation, mentioning that he looked like Andrew Gowan. The boy denied the identity, but Philippa's curiosity was aroused, and she continued to follow him until she lost sight of him near a cafe called the Poetry Place. Philippa then reported the possible sighting to the police, which, according to the Gowans, did not follow up until 6 weeks later. An employee at the Poetry Place thought she might have seen Andrew Gosden in the cafe with 2 girls when shown a photo of him. However, she admitted that it could have been someone else, as many teenage boys in the area had a similar trendy haircut, and that the CCTV cameras installed at the entrance of the building weren't operational during the alleged interaction. Philippa spoke to the boy outside of the office building. According to Kevin Gowan, the police were either slow to react or didn't follow up on these leads. Kevin believed that their focus was still on finding out why Andrew had left home instead of what happened after that, so it was impossible to determine the validity of Philippa's sighting. Reports of Andrew's whereabouts kept coming in, some from as far away as South Wales. The police wanted to question Kevin Gowan under caution as Christmas drew near. This was the last straw for Kevin, who believed the police weren't doing enough to find his son Andrew because they were wasting time and resources investigating him as the prime suspect in Andrew's disappearance. A thought kept bothering Kevin. What if he removed himself from the situation, demanding that the police instead focus on finding his son? In the days leading up to Christmas, Vicar Alan Murray brought food to the Gowans' house in the hopes of being of assistance. As he walked in, he heard a crashing noise from inside. Using a spare key, he gained access. Kevin Gowan was hanging from the upstairs balustrade. Alan cut him down and rushed him to the hospital, where he remained unconscious for 7 hours before he regained consciousness. Kevin spent several months in a mental health facility receiving treatment, and he spoke to the Yorkshire Post about the immense misery he endured during this time. "I cannot begin to describe the depths of misery that this involved." Although treatment had little effect, the Gowans remained resolute in their pursuit of media attention for Andrew's case, making appearances on various radio and television programs and chatting with every reporter who would listen. According to a friend of Andrew's who had known the Gowan family for 10 years, people wonder if something was happening at home. But I know for a fact that's not true. Kevin, who became the family's spokesperson, set up a website dedicated to the case called Help Us Find Andrew. On this site, he shared news, photos of Andrew's happy childhood, and blog posts about the impact of his disappearance. In the end, police found no evidence to suggest that the Gowans were anything other than the close-knit, loving, and supportive family that they had described themselves. Because of how kind and welcoming this family is, Andrew Gowan's absence has left me scratching my head. According to his teachers, Andrew had been a shoo-in for Cambridge University. But despite his intelligence, he had never been particularly enthusiastic about his studies. The way Kevin saw it, Andrew viewed school as a necessity to ensure he had choices in the future. Maybe he'd gotten bored or frustrated with the conventional path set out for him and had run away to start a new life. One of Andrew's favorite television shows was The Rise and Fall of Reginald Perrin. The British sitcom was about a man who faked his own death to escape the daily grind. Prior to his disappearance, Andrew had also been reading the work of famous philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche encouraged people to be free thinkers, find their own values, and stand out among the masses. As his mother told The Telegraph, maybe Andrew wanted to step off the treadmill. But the theory that Andrew had run away to start a new life didn't quite fit. Those close to Andrew knew him to be nothing but sweet and thoughtful, and they didn't think he was capable of putting his family through such immense suffering. Just 4 months prior to Andrew's disappearance, 3-year-old Madeleine McCann was reported missing from her family's Portuguese vacation home. The story had dominated UK news. Kevin and Andrew had discussed how terrible it was. If Andrew intended to go missing permanently, his loved ones assumed he would have left a note or made contact by now. Not only had Andrew emptied his bank account, but he had also left nearly £100 in birthday money unclaimed in his bedroom. The family also had a box full of emergency cash for things like bus fares, but Andrew had taken none of it. Given Andrew's age and the fact that he looked even younger than his 14 years, it was unlikely that he could have secured legitimate work or started a new life without adult help. His disappearance was also highly publicized. If Andrew was squatting somewhere, sleeping rough, or had gotten caught up with the wrong crowd, it seemed mind-boggling that someone somewhere wouldn't have recognized him. Before Andrew went missing, he'd expressed his desire to grow his hair long and dye it black. If he was trying to evade detection, he could have just as easily shaved his head or bleached his hair blonde. Even if he did alter his looks, there was no getting away from the unique double rib bridge on his upper right ear. The next logical step would be to assume that Andrew had died. If he was being groomed, then his abduction upon reaching London could have been part of a well-planned scheme involving one or more assailants, leading to his captivity or murder. On the other hand, if Andrew had been the victim of foul play, then it could have been any number of things. He could have gone to London on his own accord, just for fun, with the intention of returning home unseen by his family until he ran into the wrong person, especially given his age and the fact that he was traveling alone, which would have made him more susceptible to harm. Alternatively, his death could have been the result of an accident. If Andrew hadn't voluntarily run away, fallen victim to foul play, or been involved in an accident, it left just one other possibility: suicide. Andrew had never shown any signs of depression or self-harm. Regardless, the possibility that he could have taken his own life was considered. Andrew had always been a deep thinker. While it seemed unthinkable to his family, it was possible that Andrew had an inner world that he'd never revealed to anyone else. Perhaps he'd gone to London to spend one final day enjoying some of his favorite sights before ending things for good, saving his family the trauma of discovering his body. This could explain why he only bought a one-way ticket and hadn't bothered to bring a jacket or the charger for his PlayStation Portable. Yet, it didn't explain why he'd taken his keys, or why he hadn't left a note for his family, whom he knew would be worried sick. Most significantly, it didn't explain the absence of a body. One of Andrew's teachers told The Times, "Andrew is deep and mature beyond his years, lending credence to the family's insistence that he had not been bullied." Andrew's sister Charlotte went to the same school and was an active member of an anti-bullying program. The subject was a regular topic of conversation around the supper table. According to the school administrator, Andrew is a nice, introspective child who is content and alone when he is with his pals. However, he has never been one to do things alone. In fact, he has always had a small group of friends. Everyone thinks highly of him. Getting lost in the system is not an option at this institution. We would have been aware of any bullying if it had occurred. Following Andrew's disappearance, a post on an online forum run by the British music magazine Kang surfaced. The poster, who went by the name Bex, claimed to have gone to the same school as Andrew and were in the same classes. Andrew did get singled out a lot and only had a couple of friends, the poster said. The bullies picked on him. According to their speculation, why did he run away? If this was indeed the case, it would explain why Andrew had lately steered clear of the school bus, as well as why he had abandoned school altogether, sought a fresh start, or maybe even committed suicide. However, As the weeks and months passed, none of the possessions that Andrew had left behind on September 14th appeared. If Andrew had gone to London or somewhere else to commit suicide, evidence would have been forthcoming to support this theory. Similarly, if Andrew had merely gone to London for a day off and been in a fatal accident, nobody would have noticed because most accidents draw attention. The River Thames flows through the heart of London, so even if Andrew had jumped or fallen into it on purpose, someone would have noticed, or a body would have surfaced. All of these possibilities only served to heighten the suspicions. By the time Andrew Gowen's disappearance had occurred 1 year ago, 122 unconfirmed sightings had been reported from various parts of the United Kingdom. On the occasion of a church service in London to commemorate the anniversary, Kevin and Glenys Gowen sent an open letter to their son, which read, "Since the day you departed, we have all much missed having you here. Your presence is ever present in our thoughts. Put this in the past and don't worry about getting in touch with us if you ever read this. Your past or present lifestyle is of no concern to us. All we want is for you to be okay and for us to be able to provide you a hand if we can. No matter what, our love and pride in you will never fade." On the occasion of the anniversary, Andrew's likeness appeared on milk cartons in Iceland as part of a nationwide campaign to find his whereabouts. A month later, Kevin and Glenys shared their story on the BBC's popular current affairs show, The One Show. Shortly after, the intercom buzzed at the Lamster police station, a market town situated 150 miles southeast of London. The station was in a business park, and the desk wasn't manned around the clock. Instead, visitors could announce their arrival via the outside intercom. A male voice said he wanted to report a sighting of Andrew Gowen. An officer was dispatched to gather details, but by the time they arrived, the man had vanished. An anonymous letter was sent to the BBC shortly after, purporting to be written by the man who had escaped from the Lamster station. The letter's purported author claimed to have seen Andrew in Shuri, a town 150 miles northwest of London. The police didn't confirm this or even confirm that the two informants were the same, adding to what Kevin Gowen called a new kind of subtle torture. "Andrew knows that part of the world," he told the Doncaster Press. "Although we have gone on vacation there, our knowledge is limited. Maybe there's someone out there with knowledge we lack, but the longer this continues, the more we fear he's either dead or held captive. On the off chance that he is still alive, I'd be surprised if he showed his hand before next July, when he turns 16. Andrew's birthday passed without any news. Kevin, who had been afflicted with depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder since his suicide attempt in 2007, had been unable to work. In his quest to locate his son, he had exhausted all possible avenues. He had pleaded with Andrew through the media to inform them that he was safe. Kevin had contacted schools nationwide and made an appeal to the LGBT community, assuring Andrew that his family loved him no matter what. He had even gone so far as to attend concerts and festivals featuring bands he thought Andrew might be interested in, passing out flyers and looking for anyone who resembled his son. "I've really just run out of ideas now. I guess this is our last chance to discover the truth." On the 2-year anniversary of Andrew's disappearance, his family collaborated with the charity organization Missing People to create computer-generated images of what Andrew might look like over time. Kevin expressed his family's relief, saying, "It's reassuring to look at that and think, yes, I'd know you anywhere." The Gowens continued to worry that Andrew's appearance could have changed so much in 2 years, especially since photos of him as a baby-faced 14-year-old were still circulating. The Gowens were becoming more and more convinced that Andrew hadn't escaped after 3 years of silence. Kevin expressed their disbelief, telling the BBC, "We just find it impossible to conceive that he would allow us to go through all this for so long without even some kind of message to let us know he's okay." The lack of confirmed sightings led the family to assume that Andrew must be dead. The Gowens enlisted the aid of a friend to contact a private company that specializes in advanced sonar technology, which is usually used to find drowning victims at sea. They arranged for a 7-mile stretch of the River Thames to be searched from Wagon Barrier to Tower Bridge in central London. The sonar found a sunken boat, an overturned car, and a body, but it wasn't Andrew. The results caused the Gowens mixed feelings. Kevin thought it was slightly positive because it raised the statistical possibility that Andrew was still alive and well, but he added, It still leaves us in this horrible, ongoing, never-ending limbo of just thinking, why did you go? In September 2017, it was 10 years since Andrew Gosden vanished. The police have issued a new appeal for information, sharing Andrew's DNA, fingerprints, dental, and medical records with healthcare professionals and authorities. Many believed that Andrew would have sought optical care if he were still alive, at least once, maybe even switching to contact lenses to further change his appearance. A police spokesperson pleaded with doctors, dentists, or hospital staff who might have treated a 24-year-old man without records from the past 10 years to come forward. The call-out was also extended to any members of the public who might know Andrew Gosden, but not his real identity. Finally, they appealed to Andrew personally, addressing the matter to him. The Find Every Child campaign, which Missing People spearheaded, featured age progression images of Andrew Gosden that were plastered all over the place, from hospitals and doctors' offices to bus stations, garbage trucks, and shopping centers. The Goins even sought the advice of a behavioral analyst to try and deduce why Andrew might have gone to London on the day he went missing, and to see if there were any unknown locations they should have checked. National Crime Agency statistics showed that in England, 98% of missing children are found within a week. Andrew Gosden was one of just 2,000 people in the UK to have been missing for more than a decade. Kevin Goin raised money for missing people by holding a 10-hour vow of silence, 1 hour for every year his son had been missing, to mark the mystery. At about the same time, Michael Dixon, not his real name, was having an online conversation with a young man going by the username Andy Rue. Andy Rue explained that he was in a bit of a pickle. His partner had recently left, and he needed £200 to cover his rent. Michael noticed that Andy Rue was listed as living in Lincoln, a city in the English Midlands. Despite not living nearby, he offered to send Andy Rue some money. Andy Rue turned down the offer, explaining that he didn't have a bank account because he had left home when he was 14 years old. Michael wanted to know if it was because of problems at home, so Andy Rue said, "No, I just felt like it." With that, he ended the conversation. After seeing the constant coverage of Andrew Goin's disappearance, Michael Dixon started to wonder if Andrew and Andy Rue were the same person. He contacted the Goins, who were immediately intrigued. Andrew had a family nickname, Rue, meaning kangaroo, due to his small stature and lively personality when he was a child. The Goins weren't willing to take any chances, so they reported this online interaction to the police, who then began an investigation. After meeting with Michael Dixon, Andrew's family headed to Lincoln, where they made inquiries with locals and distributed thousands of missing persons leaflets. 4 possible sightings were reported, but none of them were Andrew Goin. Meanwhile, the police inquired with the chat provider whose identity has not been made public. The website administrators had recently implemented system changes that resulted in the loss of a lot of user data, making it impossible to determine who owned the Andy Rue profile. The Goins kept collaborating with experts to release age progression images of what Andrew might look like as the years passed. That is, assuming he was still alive. On social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram, where facial recognition software could pick up on the distinctive double ridge on Andrew's right ear, which investigators believed to be the best clue to his whereabouts. Since 2015, the Metropolitan Police have been collaborating with a team of so-called super recognizers. These individuals possess innate, above-average skills for spotting faces in a crowd. Since then, the police have appealed to anyone who attended a concert in London on the weekend of September 14, 2007, to come forward with any photos or videos they might have taken. The goal is to have the super recognizers scan the footage for anyone who resembles Andrew. In early 2020, the Goins learned that Andrew's favorite band, Slipknot, was going on a tour of the UK. If Andrew were alive and living freely, his family would have thought he'd go to one of the concerts. At the concerts, including a meet and greet with the band's guitarist, Mick Thompson, posters asking for Andrew's whereabouts were on display. Although no new leads were found, the public's attention stayed focused on the case as the search efforts persisted. After 13 long years, online detectives still couldn't stop talking about Andrew Goin's disappearance. Theories ran the gamut, from Andrew being a serial killer to him going to London to get the newest PlayStation Portable before something bad happened. Then, in January 2022, a story came out of left field. 2 men, aged 38 and 45, were arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and human trafficking on Wednesday, December 8, 2021. The older man was also arrested for possessing indecent images of children. The pair had a number of electronic devices seized, but the police said that a thorough review could take up to a year. As a result, both men were released while the inquiries continued. The police refused to disclose any further details, telling the media, "Our priority at this time is supporting Andrew's family while we work through this new line of inquiry. They have asked that their anonymity be protected while our inquiry is ongoing, and we are in frequent communication with them." After nearly 2 years with no news to report, South Yorkshire Police finally announced in late September 2023 that they had eliminated the 2 unnamed suspects in the Andrew Gowan case from their investigation. A spokesperson stated that they were confident the men had no involvement and added, "The investigation remains open and active, and we would urge anyone with information to come forward." An ambassador for the charity Missing People, Kevin Gowan educates young people on how to stay safe if they are thinking about running away from home, or what to do if they already have and want to return. If his son's disappearance taught him anything, it's that a child can have the most secure and comfortable life and still think the grass might be greener on the other side, as he told That Thin Air podcast. In an interview with Woman's Own, Kevin expressed his strong disapproval of the notion that Andrew could have been hiding anything from him. This is why it's so important for parents to have open conversations with their kids. Make them feel comfortable enough to tell you anything and assure them that there are people who will be there to support them if they ever feel like running away or making a bad choice. The Gowans have never changed their locks, just in case, and Andrew's favorite t-shirts and prized gem collection remain in a drawer, while his bank account has remained untouched since his last withdrawal on September 14, 2007. But his family keeps adding to it anyway, just in case. The day that would have been Andrew's 30th birthday was July 10th, 2023. His disappearance has now outlasted his life. Over the years, Kevin Gowan continued to care for the acorns that he and Andrew had planted when their son was 10 years old. As Andrew had predicted, some of the acorns sprouted and grew into small oak trees. Kevin replanted them, but he kept one in his own backyard. By the time Andrew was 30 years old, the tree had grown to 6 feet tall and was producing its own acorns. Kevin expressed his hope that awareness of Andrew's case would help others find positive solutions and spare other families from the pain that many of us endure on a daily basis in his blog. Andrew Gowan has been a mystery for the last 16 years, ever since he took the train to London and disappeared without a trace. Neither his whereabouts nor the possessions he left behind have been located. Kevin Gowan takes solace in the fact that he shared a joyful memory with Andrew on the night before he disappeared. The two of them were washing dishes after dinner as a father and son. Standing in the kitchen with tea towels, Kevin embraced Andrew briefly and whispered, "I love you." Kevin expressed his gratitude for that last statement on his blog, writing, "I am glad that is one of the last things I ever said to him." Kevin embarrassedly confessed to the son that he envied parents whose children had been killed because at least they had closure. He compared the inability to know to a never-ending cycle of terror, saying, "The pain is like when you have a little kid and you turn your back for 2 seconds and they vanish." Andrew lingers in his parents' thoughts constantly as they struggle with ambiguous loss. Then you come upon them once again. We will never get over the terrifying, gut-wrenching sensation you had at that time. Someone once likened it to being stabbed in the gut, which would normally hurt, but then be removed, stitched up, and heal after some time. But with this, the knife is stuck in, and you have to walk around with it, and it hurts all the time, and it gets twisted all the time.